This is the Ghetto Free Press, and I'm George Boston Ryans, and I've been here before. I'm heading to Americus, Georgia, and I thought I would stop because of what happened in Ferguson, Missouri. Jimmy Carter Regional Airport, and I'm going to go down here and see what this aviation field looked like. I've never been there before. I've stopped here at least 3 times and cut videos, which are already on YouTube. But today I'm going to take a look, and you know me, I'm going to share it with you because under our form of government, you have a right to know. So I'm going to ask you, travel with me. Let's see what's down in this hole here in Americus, Georgia. The Ghetto Free Press. And I'm George Boston Ryans, doing what I do because it must be done. And plus, you have a right to know. If we know about what's happening in Ferguson, then we sure as heck ought to know what's going on here in the state of Georgia, in the place where we live. Greetings, this is the Ghetto Free Press, and I'm George Boston Ryans, right outside of Americus, Georgia. And too often in the state of Georgia, we have historic events, historic places and monuments that we are not aware of. I'm standing in front of Lindbergh Solo Flight, May 1923. The Lone Eagle first flew solo in early May of 1923 from Southern Field. Charles Lindbergh had come to Americus to purchase a surplus aircraft from the World War I Training Center. He chose a Curtiss JN-4 Jenny. He got the plane with a brand new OX-5. You can read much of this in a few minutes. But I just want it to be known that too often here's an open field and here's a little small airport. No great monument, but we want to thank the European white people for at least wanting to maintain the history of this beloved nation. But it is no different from the black Ethiopians and the blacks in Africa who engraved their historic accomplishments on stone in Africa, or rather the land of the burnt-faced people, because we know that Africa was the name given to a European general that went in and killed people of the darker hue of God's creation. So I just want you to know that here is a piece of history, and we must remember our history, not as black folk, not as white folks, Japanese, Germans, or Chinese, but what did the human race contribute to the well-being and the upward mobility of this planet that God is so entrusted in our care. And so I just wanted to share this with you. I'm going to take a few more clips as we just kind of film here to let you know that too often our history is not kept and maintained, and therefore our children are left deaf, dumb, and blind to the times, and unable to make intelligent decisions based on facts. And this is why the Ghetto Free Press was started. And if you'll notice, the things I report, even about organizations, about people that are having problems, I go out, I cover their stories, and yet they won't even say thank you, let alone give me something for gas. And this is what we must understand, that the people who God called, chose, and elected, they catch pure hell down here in this wicked world, where the hearts of many have waxed cold. We'll support the wicked, but when you get out and you try to do what is right and decent in God's world, people will turn deaf ear to you, and they won't even let you get up to say boo, because they don't want to hear you, because they understand that they are blocking the progression of the upward mobility of the intellect of the human brain. And so they want to lift themselves up. But when it comes down to doing what is right, standing up for the least among us, well, we have to stand alone. And this is nothing new. It has always been that way. Jesus understood it. But at least, if we have any righteous people left, it seems they ought to support those who walk and act in the right image that Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and the rest of them say they wanted us to be about. But it is obvious that there is an enemy, and these enemies to truth, and these enemies of God, they just won't support you when you stand up for what is right at this wicked dispensation. But I would have you to know that perhaps Jesus the Messiah said it best, that heaven and earth would pass away, but my word would stand forever. And this is the truth, and we cannot hide this. We may not have wanted these white people to go out and erect this monument along a statue on the back about Lindbergh. Now, we read about this in the history books, but this is something that was put here so generations would know what took place here. When you go to Quitman in Brooks County, Washington Street High School produced some very educated people who went on to become colonels and generals, doctors and lawyers, but we don't even have a marker such as this, where the old Washington Street High School stood during the period of segregation. That was an all-black school. And so I want to say to black people, I want to say to the retired black educators in Brooks County, home of the Quitman 10+2, home of the Mary Turner lynching, home where a police officer, black that is, was dating a white woman, Earl Evans. Earl Evans, nicknamed Heber, was burned up in a police car, all because he was dating a white woman. And you don't hear nothing about that. The Woodens, the Densons, and many other people that were murdered outright there in Quitman. What monument, what historic marker have black people erected to show that we too care about those that came among us and who were murdered without violating any law, and nothing has been done about it. The governor of the state of Georgia then, in May of 1918, had all the names of the mob members during that week of terror in Brooks County, when blacks were just taken out of their homes and murdered, and nothing was done about it. So Ferguson is nothing new. Mary Turner, the wife of Hayes Turner that was in that week of terror, had her 8-month-old fetus ripped from her womb or abdomen. And when that little baby fell to the ground, that little black baby fell to the ground, a white mob member, according to history of the NAACP and the Crisis magazine, took the heel of his boot and crushed the head of that black child until all life was gone out of it. And so today we don't want to talk about our history, but we never tried to forbid the Jews from talking about the Holocaust. We never tried to forbid the Irish from talking about what happened to them. And so we as black men, women, and children and white right people, we had better wake up before we lose this great republic. Again, as I close, before I take a few shots, to show you what white Europeans has done here, to show the world about what they have done through their lineage and what America has done by the blood, sweat, and suffering of all Americans who came here as immigrants because they were looking for a better way. The black people of God came not as others. They came through the lineage of economic slavery and worse. But we're not here for that. I'm here for the purpose to let you know that you have a history, just like Lindbergh's solo flight of May 1923. And I want you to know that he had a solo flight in 1923, but in Rosewood in 1923, blacks were murdered there in Rosewood. So the flight from the ground to the air, the black man flight, was from the ground into the eternal death inflicted upon them by white people. And some of them, I'm sure, believe they got away. But Galatians says, 6 and 7, I think it is, that God is not mocked, for whatsoever man sow, that shall he also reap. Now let us walk around and let's be on the positive side. I'm asking you to excuse me if I go from A, B, C on to Z. But I will assure you that what I have given you is indeed the truth. And it's done not out of hate, but out of love. Because after all, as a retired military veteran, I was told that we were a nation of laws, and that we respect the laws. And if we indeed respect the laws, then we must respect the history that is put before us at this dispensation, although some, I'm sure, would love to keep it away from us. And so I just left Gordon. I was at City Council Monday night, and of course I left there and I went to a fundraiser for Mayor Mary Ann Whippaloo, as some whites and blacks are fighting that historic mayor there in Gordon, Georgia. Just like they're fighting just like they are fighting the mayor in Meigs, Georgia, Linda Harris, just like they're fighting George Ivory in Warrenton, Georgia, just like they're fighting the mayor of Davisboro, just like they are fighting the mayor probably in Quitman, Georgia, just like they're fighting the mayor in Lumpkin, Georgia, just like they're fighting the mayor in Dawson, Georgia, just like they are fighting the mayor in many other Georgia towns. But we are not too much worried about that or concerned about that, because the Bible tells us that if God be for you, he is more than the whole world against you. And so I want to do my small part in educating you and keeping you informed. I do not want you deaf, dumb, and blind to the times. I do not want you to go to public meetings and ignore the people who have sacrificed for you to have these stories, even the ones that I'm presenting, and they don't even tell you thank you. I want you to understand that if you're in the mix like me, and if when you go to public meetings and you have people in your local cities and counties and states who will not recognize those who give you the truth, just remember, it's not them. The Bible says that God hardens the hearts of people to get his point across. It's not them. And don't give all that credit to Satan. You see, some things God has reserved for himself. And so when you see this and people don't appreciate this, don't blame the people who will not even share it with their mother, their father, their sisters or brothers that are right outside of Americus, Georgia. They could find the same thing if they would only go out. And thank God for the white Europeans. They didn't fight each other. They didn't fight against the ones who was willing to erect by giving money to erect this monument. They didn't fight them. They wasn't envious of them. They joined together. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Black folks, sometimes we have trouble understanding the people that sacrifice for us like Dr. King. We don't appreciate them until they're dead. We won't even give them a glass of water until they're dead. So let's commend the white folk if we don't do it. Oh, there are many black folks that have money that could help the people in your community. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about in your own community, who could help the people who are struggling and trying to get the truth out for their people, only to have their face stepped in by other blacks because they live in ignorance and because they hate the blackness of their skin and kin. And so again, I want to say to the white America, we thank you for working with your people. We cannot criticize you. We just thank you for wanting to maintain the history as it happened here in God's world. This is the Ghetto Free Press, and I'm George Boston Rhymes. I do this because, guess what? You have a right to know. December the 3rd, 2014.